During the scorching summer months of 1097, the First Crusade encountered its most formidable challenge yet. A vast contingent of European warriors and religious pilgrims had penetrated deep into the arid landscapes of Anatolia, pressing onward toward the sacred territories with unwavering faith despite their physical exhaustion. Their triumph at Nicaea had filled them with confidence in their military capabilities. However, within mere days, across the expansive terrain near Dorylaeum, they would discover the true meaning of endurance and survival. As daybreak arrived, the thunderous sound of cavalry resonated throughout the plains. The Seljuk Turkish forces, renowned for their exceptional mobility and archery prowess, executed a devastating surprise offensive, successfully encircling the forward Crusader divisions and severing their connection to the primary army. Outnumbered, completely surrounded, and battling desperately for survival, the Crusaders established an emergency defensive formation, creating a protective barrier of shields and supply wagons against continuous waves of swift mounted attackers. Yet, remarkably, when the chaos subsided and visibility returned, the unthinkable had occurred. The Crusaders hadn't merely survived the onslaught, they had emerged victorious.
This narrative chronicles the Battle of Dorylaeum, an extraordinary account of bravery, tactical brilliance, and that critical moment when the entire First Crusade's destiny balanced precariously on the edge of disaster. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II issued a powerful declaration at the Council of Clermont that would fundamentally alter medieval history's trajectory. He passionately called upon all European Christians to mobilize militarily and reclaim the holy territories from Islamic control. His impassioned words galvanized thousands across the continent, from battle-hardened knights and power-hungry nobles to common pilgrims, all driven by religious conviction, thirst for adventure, and promises of divine redemption. This proclamation initiated the First Crusade, an expedition spanning thousands of kilometers through unfamiliar and frequently hostile territories. By 1096, the crusading forces had commenced their long march toward the eastern Mediterranean regions. Traversing rivers, mountain ranges, and vast plains, they confronted severe weather conditions, insufficient provisions, and the tremendous logistical complications of mobilizing such a large and diverse military force. These armies lacked unified command structure. Instead, they comprised separate formations commanded by influential aristocrats, including Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, and various others. Each leader contributed their own cavalry units, foot soldiers, and support personnel, creating a complex mixture of military expertise, resources, and competing ambitions. Meanwhile, the Seljuk Turkish Empire, under Sultan Kilij Arslan I's leadership, maintained dominance throughout much of Anatolia. They possessed exceptional equestrian abilities and archery skills, with superior mobility and intimate knowledge of the regional terrain, providing them substantial tactical advantages against the slower-moving, heavily armored European cavalry. Following the devastating loss of Nicaea to the combined Crusader-Byzantine forces, Kilij Arslan desperately sought to restore his military reputation. While observing the Crusaders' advance, he identified a critical vulnerability. Their forces had separated into smaller columns during the march, leaving the vanguard dangerously exposed and isolated. The Crusaders' journey toward Dorylaeum proved physically punishing. They crossed undulating hills and exposed plains, frequently with severely limited access to water sources and provisions. Extreme heat and exhaustion tested both warriors and horses to their absolute limits, while Seljuk observers monitored from safe distances, meticulously planning their assault strategy. The geographical features played an absolutely crucial role in what would unfold. The wide-open plains perfectly suited the Seljuks' ability to maximize their speed and ranged weaponry advantages, rendering the Crusader vanguard exceptionally vulnerable. Simultaneously, however, it provided potential opportunities for establishing defensive positions if the Crusaders employed intelligent tactical decisions. Kilij Arslan developed a meticulously calculated ambush strategy. His primary objective involved striking the isolated Crusader vanguard first, completely surrounding it before the main crusading army could possibly intervene. This plan depended entirely on rapid execution, achieving total surprise and flawless coordination. perfectly showcasing the Seljuks' greatest military strengths. For the crusading forces, the approaching confrontation at Dorylaeum would severely test their physical endurance, military discipline, and leadership capabilities. Victory or defeat in this engagement could decisively determine the morale and forward momentum of their entire expedition.
As the crusading armies approached Dorylaeum throughout July 1097, the stage became set for a monumental confrontation combining strategic planning, raw courage, and religious fervor. One side brought rigorous discipline, heavy protective armor, and the fierce determination of warriors undertaking a divinely ordained mission. The opposing force relied upon exceptional mobility, lightning-fast speed, and impeccable timing. The violent clash that subsequently unfolded would become an absolutely defining moment of the First Crusade, providing invaluable lessons regarding effective leadership, inter-unit coordination, and the vital importance of maintaining unity under extreme pressure. In the pre-dawn darkness of July 1st, concealed by distance and dust clouds, the massive Seljuk army began moving into position. Tens of thousands of mounted warriors advanced silently across the plains, gradually spreading outward in a wide crescent formation. The trap was methodically closing. As daylight gradually brightened the landscape, the Crusader encampment slowly came to life. Cooking fires were kindled, morning meals prepared. Horses received water. The atmosphere remained cool and peaceful until a faint rhythmic sound began drifting on the morning breeze. Initially distant and indistinct, resembling far-off thunder, it steadily grew louder and more insistent, the unmistakable pounding of countless hooves. Scout riders came racing back at maximum speed, desperately shouting warnings. From the eastern horizon, enormous dust clouds were rapidly rising. Within minutes, the Seljuk advance forces materialized, spreading across the plains in extended fluid formations. Their battle standards fluttered dramatically in the morning light, and the initial volleys of arrows began raining down upon the camp. The Crusaders had absolutely no time to establish proper battle formations. Bohemond responded instantaneously, barking urgent commands to secure the encampment perimeter and rally the knights. He had previously faced enemy ambushes in southern Italy's rugged terrain, but never on such a massive scale. Immediately recognizing he was severely outnumbered and completely surrounded, Bohemond made a rapid, decisive judgment that quite likely preserved his entire army from annihilation. He deliberately refused to order an aggressive charge, fully understanding that his heavy cavalry units would be completely overwhelmed if they attempted pursuit across open terrain. Instead, he commanded his forces to establish a defensive perimeter surrounding the camp, utilizing the baggage wagons as improvised fortification structures. The infantry and crossbowmen were strategically positioned between the wagons, creating a protective shield wall. The mounted knights dismounted, joining the defensive line to reinforce its strength. Non-combatants, women, servants, clergy, were directed toward the center, receiving protection from the encircling enemy riders. It represented an impressive demonstration of discipline under extreme pressure. The entire encampment transformed into a makeshift fortress of timber and steel within mere minutes. Bohemond personally rode along the defensive lines, actively encouraging his soldiers and constantly reminding them that relief forces were approaching. The main crusading army was following behind them, and they merely needed to maintain their position long enough for reinforcements to reach them. The Seljuk horse archers now moved closer, circling the Crusader position like predatory hawks. They released continuous waves of arrows, each mounted archer firing while maintaining full galloping speed. The air above the encampment filled with the distinctive sound of bowstrings and the whistling of innumerable arrows. To the Crusaders manning the perimeter, it surely seemed as though the heavens themselves were raining deadly projectiles. Yet their shields and armor proved remarkably effective. The knights crouched protectively beneath their shields, while the crossbowmen returned fire whenever possible, carefully targeting exposed enemy riders. Kilij's tactical approach wasn't to assault the camp directly, at least not immediately. His primary goal involved exhausting and demoralizing the crusading forces, compelling them to abandon their defensive formation or exhaust their strength through futile counterattacks. The Seljuk light cavalry maintained an unrelenting rhythm of attack and strategic withdrawal, completely surrounding the encampment by mid-morning. Contemporary historical chroniclers described the cacophony as absolutely overwhelming. The persistent thundering of hooves, shouted commands in multiple languages, the constant impact of arrows striking shields. Massive dust clouds rose around the camp, obscuring the sunlight and transforming the atmosphere into a golden haze. Inside the Crusader perimeter, conditions remained tense yet controlled. Bohemond's senior lieutenants, Robert of Normandy, Tancred, and Robert of Flanders, each assumed responsibility for specific defensive sections. Clergy moved among the soldiers, displaying crosses prominently and offering spiritual blessings. When morale showed signs of wavering, Bohemond ordered his trumpeters to sound, not signaling attack, but rather as a powerful symbol of courage and unity. The echoing horn calls rolled across the plains, answering the Seljuk war cries with the steady rhythm of defiance.
Hour after grueling hour, the Crusaders endured the relentless assault. Whenever any section of the defensive line showed signs of faltering, Bohemond's knights immediately reinforced it. When horses panicked or soldiers weakened under mounting fatigue, their fellow warriors stepped forward to close any gaps. Although the Seljuks' arrows caused significant disruption, their attacks consistently failed to penetrate the improvised barricade. The heavy shields, wagon walls, and chainmail armor absorbed the majority of the impacts. The Seljuks were unquestionable masters of maneuver warfare, but lacked expertise in siege tactics, and Bohemond had effectively transformed the open plains into a defensive fortress. Nevertheless, the situation remained extremely perilous. The Crusaders' water supplies were rapidly depleting. The sun climbed steadily higher. Heat radiated intensely from the metal armor, and physical exhaustion began seriously affecting the defenders. If assistance didn't arrive promptly, the defense couldn't possibly last much longer. Around midday, Bohemond's sentries detected something on the distant horizon. Faint glimmers of reflected metal, flashes of movement. Initially, they feared another wave of enemy forces, but soon the reality became unmistakably clear. The banners of Godfrey of Bouillon were approaching. The main crusading force had detected the distant sounds of battle and marched rapidly through the morning to reach the battlefield. Their timely arrival would fundamentally alter everything. But at this particular point in the engagement, Bohemond's soldiers remained unaware of how close relief actually was. Inside the defensive ring, news spread rapidly. Reinforcements are approaching. The exhausted soldiers raised their shields and erupted in cheers, the sound rolling across the battlefield like a powerful wave. For the first time all day, the balance of hope decisively shifted. Sultan Kilij Arslan, from his elevated observation point overlooking the battle, immediately recognized the danger. His scouts reported dust rising from the west, unmistakable signs of another substantial force approaching. He urgently ordered his forces to intensify their attacks, desperately hoping to finish the Crusaders before the reinforcements could possibly arrive. But the Crusader defensive line refused to break. Every attempted breach of the wagon barriers met an impenetrable wall of steel and determination. The Seljuk horses, exhausted after hours of continuous maneuvering, began noticeably slowing. The rhythm of their attacks began faltering. The stage was now perfectly set for the dramatic arrival of the Second Crusading Army, an event that would completely reverse the battle's momentum. By early afternoon, Bohemond's encampment had successfully withstood nearly 6 continuous hours of sustained attack. The Crusaders were battered, exhausted, and desperately thirsty, yet their formation still maintained integrity. It represented one of the most remarkable defensive stands throughout the entire First Crusade, a powerful testament to rigorous training, iron discipline, and unshakable morale. To the warriors inside that circle of wagons, mere survival felt miraculous. They had confronted overwhelming numerical superiority, surrounded completely with no protective walls except their faith and unity.
During those tension-filled hours, the Crusaders demonstrated that courage under fire could prove as powerful a weapon as any sword or lance. From the far western approach, scouts reported unusual movement patterns, a column of knights and infantry cresting the low ridges. The approaching figures glinted brilliantly in the midday sunlight, battle standards fluttering, trumpets sounding, unmistakable indicators of the main crusading army marching to support the besieged vanguard. Initially, some feared deception or another Seljuk detachment, but the sight of recognizable banners, those belonging to Godfrey of Bouillon, Baldwin of Boulogne, Raymond of Toulouse, and Bishop Adhemar of Le Puy, rapidly confirmed that reinforcements had indeed arrived. The psychological effect on Bohemond's beleaguered forces was immediate and dramatic. Shouts of encouragement rose along the entire defensive perimeter. Knights raised their lances proudly, archers steadied their aim, and infantry soldiers squared their shoulders. Relief, renewed determination, and fresh energy surged throughout the encampment. For the first time all day, the Crusaders genuinely felt that victory was achievable.
Godfrey of Bouillon, renowned equally for courage and tactical discipline, personally led the initial wave of reinforcements. Accompanied by his brother Baldwin and a contingent of battle-hardened knights, Godfrey's approach was calculated and methodically precise. Unlike the vanguard, which had been pinned defensively in position, Godfrey possessed the freedom to choose both the timing and angle of his assault. The moment his cavalry units approached the Seljuk formations, they struck decisively at the enemy's exposed flank. The sudden, concentrated charge forced the Seljuks to divert substantial forces away from the encirclement to counter this unexpected threat. What had been a perfect surrounding ring of attackers around Bohemond's camp began stretching and loosening considerably. Godfrey's arrival accomplished far more than merely strengthening the defense. It fundamentally shifted tactical initiative. The Seljuks, who had been completely dictating the pace and location of combat, now faced serious pressure from an unexpected direction. Their mobility, normally their greatest strategic asset, became suddenly constrained. Shortly thereafter, Count Raymond of Toulouse and Bishop Adhemar of Le Puy arrived with substantial additional troops, both infantry and mounted cavalry. Their numbers reinforced Godfrey's initial contingent and significantly widened the front against the Seljuks. Adhemar's presence carried symbolic as well as tactical significance. Bearing the papal cross, he reminded the Crusaders that their mission possessed sacred purpose and that they participated in something far greater than themselves. His speeches and prayers reinvigorated the soldiers, particularly the foot soldiers and camp followers who had endured hours of relentless assault. With Raymond's forces now properly positioned, the Crusaders could finally organize a coordinated counteroffensive. The vanguard, previously isolated, was no longer fighting alone. Lines of knights prepared to charge, infantry reinforced vulnerable perimeter sections, and crossbowmen readied themselves to push the Seljuks back further. Bohemond, Godfrey, Raymond, and their senior commanders rapidly synchronized their forces. The tactical plan was straightforward, yet highly effective.
For the first time in the engagement, the Crusaders were dictating the battle's flow. The Seljuks, who had spent the entire morning in complete control, were suddenly forced onto the defensive. Sultan Kilij Arslan recognized the grave danger immediately. His forces possessed exceptional mobility, but they absolutely could not withstand a concentrated assault across multiple fronts simultaneously. The Seljuk tactical approach of surrounding and exhausting the enemy had definitively failed. The enemy now possessed superior numbers, excellent cohesion, and renewed fighting spirit. Confronted with the serious risk of being trapped themselves, the Sultan made the pragmatic decision to withdraw. In an orderly fashion, Seljuk units began pulling back strategically, employing their traditional hit-and-run tactics to cover the retreat.
Their exceptional mobility allowed them to evacuate the battlefield without experiencing a complete rout, but tactical initiative had passed decisively to the Crusaders. By mid-afternoon, the plain surrounding Dorylaeum had grown quiet. Bohemond's vanguard, once isolated and facing potential destruction, had been successfully reinforced and reorganized. The Seljuks retreated in good military order, conceding the battlefield to Crusader control. Although there had been no dramatic storming of fortifications or massive cavalry charges, the battle had been won through discipline, precise timing, and excellent coordination. The vanguard's remarkable endurance, combined with the reinforcements' timely arrival, perfectly demonstrated the critical importance of unity and strong leadership in medieval warfare. The crusading forces had absorbed an invaluable lesson. Even the most experienced and mobile adversaries could be overcome through resilience, careful planning, and coordinated action. The First Crusade would continue penetrating deeper into Anatolia with significantly renewed confidence and an established reputation for both determination and faith that would precede them throughout the territories ahead. The arrival of reinforcements at Dorylaeum represented far more than a mere tactical victory. It dramatically boosted morale across the entire crusading army, conclusively proved the immense value of cooperation between separate contingents, and powerfully demonstrated the importance of effective leadership at multiple command levels. For the Seljuks, it provided a harsh lesson about underestimating enemy capabilities. They had confidently assumed that divided forces could be systematically destroyed piecemeal. Yet the Crusaders' remarkable resilience and ability to coordinate effectively under extreme pressure made the critical difference. This pivotal turning point at Dorylaeum would echo throughout the entire First Crusade, fundamentally shaping strategies, alliances, and confidence of those who would eventually march all the way to Jerusalem. The Battle of Dorylaeum wasn't merely a dramatic clash of armies, but also represented an invaluable study in medieval strategy, battlefield leadership, and decision-making under extreme pressure. The performance of Bohemond of Taranto during the early crisis hours exemplifies calculated leadership under severe stress. Facing a numerically superior and highly mobile enemy force, he deliberately chose defensive tactics over reckless offensive action. His key decisions included forming a wagon perimeter, utilizing the army's supply wagons as temporary fortification created a secure center for non-combatants and a stronghold for combat personnel, organizing infantry and knights efficiently. Bohemond strategically distributed his available forces to maximize defensive coverage, assigning experienced knights to critical positions while keeping crossbowmen and infantry ready to respond flexibly. Maintaining morale, he personally encouraged the troops throughout the ordeal, ensured religious leaders actively supported morale, and instilled firm confidence that relief forces were en route.
Bohemond's exemplary leadership demonstrates that thorough preparation and solid organizational structure can effectively compensate for numerical disadvantage. His composure under pressure prevented panic and allowed the Crusaders to survive until assistance arrived. The perfectly timed arrival of Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond of Toulouse illustrates the absolutely critical importance of timing in medieval warfare. Godfrey executed a rapid flanking maneuver immediately upon reaching the battlefield, striking the Seljuk formations from an unexpected direction. His disciplined cavalry leveraged speed and shock effect, significantly relieving pressure on the beleaguered vanguard. Raymond, supported by Bishop Adhemar, reinforced both the center and flanks, providing the Crusaders sufficient mass to organize an effective counterattack. The combined synergistic effect of these leaders clearly demonstrates that reinforcements represent far more than simple numbers. They constitute a powerful strategic tool. Coordinated action dramatically amplified the defensive efforts of Bohemond's vanguard, decisively turning the battle's momentum. The Battle of Dorylaeum had concluded, but its reverberations would resonate far beyond the sunlit plains of Phrygia.
The Crusaders had survived a near-catastrophic ambush, reversed the tide with perfectly timed reinforcements, and compelled the Seljuks to retreat in orderly fashion. The aftermath of this confrontation would profoundly shape the First Crusade in multiple ways, significantly influencing strategy, morale, and the confidence of both armies. For the crusading forces, the victory at Dorylaeum proved transformational in several crucial ways. Morale boost. Soldiers who had endured hours of complete encirclement now deeply understood the power of unity and discipline. The vanguard's remarkable endurance, combined with the timely arrival of Godfrey, Raymond, and their forces, became legendary examples of courage under extreme pressure. Chroniclers noted that confidence surged dramatically through the ranks. Even the most hesitant knights and foot soldiers drew inspiration to continue the arduous march toward Jerusalem. Reinforced reputation. News of the victory spread rapidly throughout the region. The Crusaders were increasingly viewed as resilient, well-organized, and capable of overcoming overwhelming odds. Local towns and cities along the Anatolian route began regarding them with mixed caution and respect, sometimes offering provisions or safe passage rather than armed resistance. Strategic momentum. Dorylaeum effectively cleared the route deeper into Anatolia. The Seljuks had retreated eastward, leaving territory under Crusader control more secure and permitting the army to regroup and continue the march toward Antioch. The victory convincingly demonstrated that the Crusaders could survive and thrive even in hostile enemy territory. For Sultan Kilij Arslan's forces, Dorylaeum provided a harsh lesson in both caution and adaptability. Loss of initiative. The Seljuks had fully intended to annihilate the vanguard and dominate the Crusaders, but the arrival of reinforcements completely nullified their ambush strategy. Kilij Arslan was compelled into strategic withdrawal, demonstrating that mobility alone couldn't guarantee success against properly coordinated forces. Psychological impact. The inability to decisively defeat the Crusaders significantly damaged Seljuk prestige and reputation. While their army remained formidable and dangerous, the awareness that the Crusaders possessed resilience, discipline, and effective leadership fundamentally changed how the Seljuks approached future encounters. Shift in tactics. Following Dorylaeum, Kilij Arslan would increasingly rely on strategic avoidance, harassment operations, and defensive positions rather than direct engagement when facing the main crusading army. The battle clearly highlighted the inherent limitations of even the most skilled mounted archers when confronted by prepared, disciplined, and properly reinforced opponents. The aftermath of Dorylaeum offered profound lessons extending far beyond the battlefield itself. For the Crusaders, discipline, unity, and timely reinforcements could successfully overcome numerical disadvantages. The paramount importance of morale, leadership, and coordination between separate contingents became abundantly clear. Even a geographically divided army could prevail if its leaders acted decisively and cooperatively. For the Seljuks, mobility and ambush tactics, while powerful, possessed definite limitations. Successfully isolating the enemy was absolutely crucial, and the consequences of misjudging enemy coordination capabilities could prove extremely costly. The battle definitively highlighted the critical need for accurate intelligence, perfect timing, and comprehensive contingency planning. With Dorylaeum behind them, the Crusaders continued their march through Anatolia with substantially renewed confidence. The victory conclusively proved they could survive sophisticated ambushes, coordinate effectively across multiple contingents, and leverage both faith and discipline to overcome highly skilled adversaries. For the Seljuks, the retreat meant that the Anatolian heartland was no longer under secure control. Kilij Arslan would regroup and prepare for future engagements, but Dorylaeum had unmistakably shown that the Crusaders weren't merely a passing threat, they represented a persistent and highly capable military force.
Military historians consistently emphasize that the psychological effects of Dorylaeum were equally as significant as the tactical victory itself. Soldiers who had faced hours of relentless pressure and miraculously survived emerged considerably bolder and more confident. Leaders who coordinated successfully substantially strengthened their authority, ensuring that the army advanced with enhanced unity and clear purpose. In numerous ways, Dorylaeum functioned as a proving ground, a severe test of leadership capabilities, military discipline, and physical endurance that thoroughly prepared the Crusaders for the lengthy and challenging campaign ahead. Dorylaeum is historically remembered not only for its tactical lessons, but for the resilience and coordination it so dramatically demonstrated. The Crusaders learned that even when isolated and surrounded, disciplined leadership, timely reinforcements, and sustained morale could transform near-certain defeat into decisive victory. The Seljuks, meanwhile, recognized the definite limitations of relying solely on mobility, subsequently refining their approach in subsequent encounters. The battle became an absolutely defining moment in the First Crusade, fundamentally shaping strategies, reputations, and the confidence of both sides as they moved inexorably toward Antioch and beyond.